Greetings and bienvenue, Midnight Crew. Thank you for returning to this broadcast. And welcome to new viewers joining us for the first time. If you like a video, then feel free to subscribe.
Creepy true story thread. Only stuff that has happened to you or your family, so OC only. I'll start. Most of my mother's side of the family swears that werewolves are real. Apparently, back in the 70s or 80s, my mother and her brothers, parents, uncles, and cousins used to live in a rural home in southern Brazil. One night, they heard howling outside, and her creepy uncle came home worried and grabbed his rifle. My mother was about 12 at the time and was scared shitless when creepy uncle told them it was a werewolf. He then began to spread salt on the front door and windows and asked the others for help. The howling turned to growling and was getting closer. Eventually, they all heard a thud on the front porch. The front door had one of those old mosquito screens on it, and when creepy uncle opened it slightly, my mother and all her present relatives swear they saw a huge wolf with slightly humanoid characteristics. Creepy uncle then quickly closed the door. They all waited inside until sunrise, and then there were only paw prints outside. The whole family swears this is true to this day, but maybe it was just overactive imaginations. I have more stories, but now it's your turn, /x/.
Creepy true stories. I punched a ghost. Well, shadow person. I grew up in the same house my mother grew up in, and it seemed to be haunted by something to some degree. I couldn't even walk through my basement, and my room would occasionally get weird. Fortunately, not as bad as what my mom saw, but I would get poked in the head in my sleep and stuff. Interestingly, my mom had forgotten about her childhood hauntings until I told her about my experiences after we moved. We had also found a book that belonged to my dickbag uncle on black magic in the process of moving. Anyway, this one night I am sleeping in bed when my dream takes a turn for the worse and I wake up. Look to my left, and standing there looking at me is a shadow man. 3-dimensional shadow. No face. What happened next was over in less than a second, but felt like forever. I clenched my fist and prayed to God while I put my fist right through the cool chest of that shadowy fucker. Yes, cool. The air where the shadow existed was cooler than the rest of the room, but he didn't last for long. Almost immediately after I made contact, he started to disappear from around my fist. Never saw one again. Although occasionally in my new house, I feel like something tries to feed off me as I sleep, but it knows not to confront me head-on. Creepy activity was actually almost non-existent for a few weeks after that shadowy punch.
All right, I'll contribute. I have quite a few stories and I'll try my best to retell them. They're from my uncles. First one is relatively short and takes place, roughly, 20 years ago, so when he was 19. He had just bought a house near the edge of a river, in the middle of the woods. This is also a complex type of thing. I don't know the word for it. It's basically one building here, another next to it, so on and so forth. He lives with one other roommate who has a dog. Roommate was off grocery shopping, and this story was close to night. Like, dusk, I should say. Sun is starting to go down. So anyway, he's in the backyard setting up a campfire when he hears a snap come from the woods. When he looks up and there's this big hairy thing. Think of Bigfoot. Okay, but thicker hair. And it's standing there staring at him. He freezes. The dog at the time had stayed home, keeping him company. The thing starts barking at whatever is standing there, but it still doesn't move. Uncle hears more branches breaking, snapping, and he realizes there's more of the things walking behind this one. Literally, a group of these things walked right by this building. When they had passed, this thing turns and continues on its way, like a guard or something. He was the only one. The only other witness he had was the dog. It's dead, buried 6 feet under. The only other evidence he has is memory and a picture that he drew immediately after. He went into the house, took a pen and a piece of paper and drew what he saw. Second one comes from my other uncle. He's experienced this twice now, once as a kid, once as an adult with his kids. I'll tell you about when he was a kid. He went out fishing with his father, my grandfather. This is the same spot he took me to, but we settled on a place nearby. Now it's one big river, with 2 lakes off to the side, with a stretch of land going between the 2 lakes, the river, and on the other side of these lakes was a giant rock cliff. It slanted enough that something large enough could climb up, but not a human being. We've tried. These rocks are bigger than we are. At least the ones on ground level are. Uncle, who is over 6 feet tall, can't climb this cliff. Anyway, he's fishing with his father, and just out of nowhere he goes, "Pack your shit, let's go." And without even seeing if he was going to, packs his fishing rod away, puts his tackle box away, picks both up, and waits long enough for Uncle to get his shit together. The moment he does, he's being shoved down this path towards the bike he had taken. This is also in the middle of the day. I apologize, I keep missing fucking detail. He's being shoved along with words of "hurry up, let's go," and "keep moving." Now, they had hiked this path, and it took an hour. An hour. This time around, Grandpa made sure it took less time to do so. He still couldn't figure out what the hell was going on, but didn't question. He didn't have a chance either. When they finally reached the bike, Grandpa whips around, 44 Magnum in his hand from the bike, and he lets off 3 shots in as rapid succession as he can muster. Uncle turns around as Grandpa climbs onto the bike and sees the silhouette of something hiding behind a tree. It's big, it's dark, it was looking at them. He didn't get a good chance to look at it because of 2 reasons. 1, Grandpa floors it and gets the hell out of Dodge, and 2, it starts downpouring like a switch was flipped. Now this is the second encounter, at the same place. Don't ask me why you go to the same place, but whatever. Says it's a good fishing spot. Anyway, he takes his son and nephew this time. He has a truck and camping gear because he plans on staying for a few nights. He's that type of person. Outdoorsy type. They get everything set up. His son is off doing whatever. Nephew is out fishing. He's setting up the tent, and not even 10 minutes afterwards, his son goes, "Dad, we're being watched." Uncle looks up, sees nothing, asks where, and it's at the top of the rock cliff I had spoken of in the last experience recap. Still, he doesn't see anything, but just to be safe, he gets up and walks forward a few to see what it is. It is around this time that he tries to climb the wall to get a better picture. It's at this point he figures out he can't climb it this way. It's a hill, slanted, and it dips down towards the path, past the 2 lakes, next to the path they had used. So he goes up that way. Still, nobody is seen. He does, however, find a stone house. 3 walls, roof, all from stone slabs no human could really pick up, but think nothing of it. He goes back down and sets up everything. Everything is good, everything is set. An hour afterwards, his son goes, there he is again. Uncle whips around and looks up at the cliff. There's a black figure standing there, watching the 3 of them. Nephew notices it as well. Uncle, being the adult here, steps forward and pulls out the .44 Magnum from his father. He shows that he has it. He shows that it's armed. Hammer cocked back. The thing didn't budge. It did, however, move closer. Uncle raises the weapon and fires it. Thing pauses, but doesn't flinch. Again, he fires. The thing starts to move closer again. "Pack your shit, let's go." Son and nephew pack their shit and start heading down the path. Uncle right behind them, carrying everything else and holding the gun. He tells them, since nephew knows how to drive a standard, that if he's not there in 10 minutes to drive to the nearest town, and his son to grab the shotgun in the back, load it, and if he sees something in the woods unfamiliar, to shoot it. Kids are freaked by this point, and they practically run for the truck. Uncle turns to look over his shoulder. This thing is making its way down the hill towards them, and will more than likely intersect where the hill meets the path, so he starts running as fast as he can. Time seemed to fly by. Night and day seemed to go by faster, but he kept going. Nothing really happens to him, and he reaches the truck. Still, to be on the safe side, he whips around, unloads the rest of the ammo he has in the gun at nothing, hops in the truck and drives off.
I'll share one of my many, I guess. I was in 4th grade when my family decided to move to a house after being evicted from our apartment, and the move wasn't too bad. In our apartment, my sisters claim a lot of weird shit went on and that a shadow man watched me sleep one night. I was still too young to understand anything, so I didn't believe it besides one experience there. Anyway, the first week of moving in, my family went shopping for furniture and left me alone since we set up the TV already. I can't really say what time it was, but this happened in broad daylight. I was watching TV, don't remember details until I heard childish laughter. I brushed it off because there were a lot of kids in my neighborhood, but I wasn't good at making friends. I remember, however, that the laughter sounded a hell of a lot closer inside the house. I was scared shitless and decided to run to my room. As I ran into our dining room, I stopped. On the wall, I saw 3 silhouettes of kids running. I don't mean it was implanted on the wall or anything. The shadows actually moved across the wall as if running while I heard the laughter again. They passed over into my mom's room and I ran back to the TV and turned the volume up trying to forget what happened. I've told my family, but we all have seen this. We cannot explain both in our house and in our old apartment. I have to go, but the last thing is that most of the experiences by anybody in my family resulted in some shadow figure entering my mom's closet.
Where I grew up, there was a legend of the runner. Long story short, everyone saw it as a different figure but completely white. My grandmother still swears she saw it as a big white horse. It runned right beside her and through my neighbor's farm's wood gate. We always saw weird things happening there at night, but that was the best.
The only spectral experience I've ever had was when I first moved into my childhood home. Long story short, this story matches up with something I and my mom saw. Our home had been owned by an elderly couple and they each died within a few years of each other. After the wife died, their children sold the house to my parents. When we first moved into the house, I was 3, so I don't remember any of these events, but my mom always told us about it. For the first few weeks, the house had weird discrepancies, faucets twisting on by themselves, lights flickering when we weren't home. Neighbors warned our parents to get us, their kids, to quit playing with the lights because it was distracting. We lived in a small rural community with large clearings of land and everyone in town could see our house. Other weird things would happen, all trivial. Fridge and doors would slip open. This old comm device that the previous owners used between floors would flip on, etc. Oh, and the basement was creepy. Maybe it was just the old wood knots and the wall panels looking like eyes, but it always felt like there was a presence down there, particularly in the laundry utility room that the old man used as his shop room. After the first week, my mom thought she saw white figures walking down the driveway in the evening, elderly people by the looks of it. Sometimes she'd see them in the house and we'd hear footsteps in the evening from the basement or the attic. Finally, my mom's last sighting were 2 white horses jumping the fence in the backyard, running through the back, down the driveway, and dissipating along the road. We never had any weird occurrences after that. Our theory is that the spirits of the old couple were letting go of the home and moving on, whatever that means. Still, presence in the basement never quite left, and we'd hear some creepy but not aggressive shit down there once in a while. Again, though, probably nothing.
I remember that my friends and I were once at a country club, and it was really late and dark and we were just hanging around, and we started walking down this hill, and I turned to my best friend, and I see a white figure run as the speed of light right behind her. And I remember I almost shat myself. And sir, I think you have helped me figure out what it was.
I've got a real story. I have no proof that it was actually paranormal, or if it was a problem with the camera or film. I wasn't ever able to actually see the negatives. That said, I went to Crazyman's in Roanoke, Texas with a few friends to see if we could catch anything on film or audio. I won't go into the stories about Crazyman's. You can look them up online. One of them brought her camera and was trying to take a picture of the water tower, but she complained that it wasn't working when she tried to take a picture of the tower. I had taken photo art in high school and knew cameras well enough, so I asked to see the camera. To begin with, the camera used 35mm film and was set to autofocus. On this particular camera, the lens focused on whatever was in the center of the camera. There were no options to change where the autofocus was, so I got the tower in frame, then lightly held the button without fully pressing it to get the lens to autofocus. It wouldn't focus upon the tower. What was clear, however, was the tree line behind the tower. It perfectly focused on the trees, but not the tower. In order to get the shot, I turned off autofocus and manually adjusted it until I had a clear image of the tower in focus. Anyway, a week later the photos were developed, and one of my friends came by to show me them. In the picture I took, the only one that was in portrait instead of landscape, the tower didn't appear at all. I can't rule out the possibility that they were messing with me, or that the film was bad in some way I couldn't fathom. All I know is that the tree line that was behind the tower appeared in the shot. The tower itself, however, was not there at all.
Real OC? Well, it's not that /X/ related, but here I'll go. Lived in a semi-scummy neighborhood and somebody got in once because I left the door unlocked, but they didn't steal anything. They took my phone out of my other pair of pants and filmed me in the living room through the hallway. Only for a few seconds, but there was no question. It was me just watching television. It was fucking terrifying because I discovered the vid at about 2 in the morning the next day because I couldn't sleep, and I was messing with my phone, watched the video, freaked out, then manned up a bit and went down to lock the door, which I found had been unlocked the whole time. It set me on edge for days, the fact they were able to walk in and get deep into the house without making enough sound to alert me and just watch me like that, and put my phone back where they found it. They didn't take a thing, they just watched me.
Some people around here, Eastern Europe, steal like that. They wait until you have guests over and go in. Most likely, you're gonna be chatting and drinking in your living room with your friends and not giving a shit about the rest of the house. And most often, you'll leave your door unlocked because you might expect one more friend to come by or something. Hopefully, you'll lock your doors like crazy now.
Well, my other story is about the other side of the family. When I was in high school, there was a point where I was living at my grandma's place. She spent most of her time out of town, so I had the whole place all to myself. Trouble is, I'm pretty sure it was haunted. The first I heard of something weird there was my aunt telling me about when she used to live there as well. Apparently, she was in her teens and had just seen Titanic for the first time. Being a fellow artist, she made a sketch of Leo DiCaprio in a little notebook, and then left it on a table by the window. She didn't think much of it, and later went to sleep, forgetting to close the window. The next morning, when she woke up, the curtains were open, and the notebook was turned to another page. On that page was an anatomical sketch of a humanoid alien being waving. She burned the notebook and started locking all the windows at night after that. My experiences in that place were a bit more subtle, but still creepy.
Okay, I've got a few. My father has gone hunting in southern Iowa for over 30 years, and sometime during the early 80s, he and 1 or 2 of his buddies were walking around just casually exploring for new hunting spots until they came upon a house in the edge of the woods. It was abandoned and run down. They went inside and went into the living room. He told me he has never seen anything that creepy in his life. There apparently were dry bloodstains all over the floor and melted candles that apparently had been used at one time. On top of it all, there was a dirty-ass couch with a pentagram above it, in some type of red substance. He didn't know if it was blood or some type of paint that had been there for some time. I myself had only 2 creepy experiences, and I'll make them quick. I was 3 at the time, and my grandmother had really bad dementia and lived with my parents and I. I was still in my crib at the time, but one night I woke up in the middle of the night. My bedroom door was always left open because I didn't like complete darkness, and the hall light was on. But my door was cracked instead, and I saw a shadowy figure not 3 feet away from me, and the only feature I could make out was its eyes, just pure bright white. It just stood there, and I asked it questions like, "Who are you?" or "What do you want?" And it would just repeat it back. I just remember putting my blanket over my face and forcing myself back to sleep. I don't know what it was. Could have been my grandmother, but I swear it did not sound like her. The second thing was I was maybe 10 years old, just got my bunk bed and I was sleeping on my bottom bunk. I specifically remember dreaming, and in my dream I had woken up in my bed at 8 a.m. and was facing my right side. I situated myself and looked up, and there was a green creature, like a goblin in Magic, The Gathering. It was clinging to the bottom of my top bunk. It twisted its head around and had a smile like the cat in Alice in Wonderland. It just said, "Hello, Anon." I woke up sweating my ass off and screaming, but nothing was coming out of my mouth, like I was mute. It was like 10 a.m. and my parents were just chilling in the kitchen having breakfast.
I apologize in advance for my terrible English. I live in Lima, Peru. When I was 18, I used to drive out of town to my family's summer house, which is 97 kilometers south of Lima. I always took a rural road so I wouldn't have to pay for the highway toll, which is expensive. This rural road crosses a little town called Lurin, which is known for having large cemeteries and some wooded areas. One day, my girlfriend and I decided to go to the house during winter because nobody would be there to disturb us. The problem is that during winter these roads are lonely. We were driving down this rural road close to 10 p.m., and we noticed a man on the side of the road waving his hands, like trying to get our attention. So, I decided to pull over in order to help him. My girlfriend said I should stay in the car since it could be a mugger trying to rob us. I should have listened to her because what I saw that day still messes with my mind and everything I knew to be logical. As I approached this guy, who looked like a homeless man in his mid-40s, I noticed something strange about him, like an unnatural body movement. I yelled at him, asking if he needed any help. This guy turned in my direction and started to walk towards me. The thing is that he had his mouth open, like trying to scream, but no sound was coming from him. He got closer and closer at a very slow pace, and I noticed he wasn't walking. He was floating several inches above the ground. I heard my girlfriend screaming. I noped out of there, ran to the car, hit the gas, and returned to the main highway. To this day, I don't know what I saw that day. My girlfriend said she screamed because she saw this guy not only floating but with his clothes covered in blood or something like that. I didn't notice that at the moment. Needless to say, I never took that road again.
Only scary thing that's ever happened to me. Living in the city. Come in late one night, very sleepy. Up the stairs to my room, get inside and immediately go to sleep. Next day have to go out on a breakfast food run. Heading down the hall, see some blood drops on the floor. Nothing that alarming. Until I get to the stairs and there's a lot more on the first step and banister. Head back, call the cops. Have to survive on a gourmet Pop-Tart breakfast this morning. 2 beat cops show up, call it in, then come in and talk to me. Tell them everything. End up just repeating myself. They say they'll call me if they need me. Thank you for the help, blah, blah, blah. Come back from work later that night. Different uniformed cops approach me in the lobby. Did you know of a one miss? You don't need to know. Some Spanish woman down the hall. Nice lady, but kept to herself. Yeah, I mean not really that well. I know who she is. Her door was broken and is declared missing. Anything you want to tell us? Nope. Some more questions, then they leave. 2 more days go by and the first cops I saw stopped me again in the lobby. Spanish woman was found murdered. A very grisly scene. Can you come down and answer some questions? Same old bullshit, but they're very patient with me. I leave. Another few days go by and they call me saying they found the guy. An ex-boyfriend pissed off about something. Thank you for your help, citizen. Bye. I guess he went there to argue. She tried to kick him out. He punched her, dragged her to the stairs, cut her face, the blood, and killed her in some abandoned building, stuffing her body in a garbage can. Suddenly, it hits me like a stepfather. I was woken up at like 2 a.m. to somebody playing a TV show too loud with people screaming and banging around. Only woke me up for a minute, and then I fell back asleep. MFW, that wasn't a TV show.
Okay, here is some OC, and I want you guys to help me know if it's my house or not. A few years ago, if I remember correctly, I was 16 or 17 years old. I'm currently 26. One time I was watching TV alone in my house. It was around 2 a.m. and everything was quiet except for the TV sound. Then, all of a sudden, I heard this whisper-like scream on my left side saying, "What are you doing?" I was frozen for a second, then I jumped out of my chair to turn on the lights, and there was nothing there. The door was locked, and no soul was to be seen around the streets. Right after this, I went to sleep, thinking it was just me being tired. So that's what happened to me. A few years after this happened, when I was 22, I was working the night shift at a convenience store near my house. So, as usual, I went back home at 7 or 8 a.m., and my mother was sleeping on my bed waiting for me. She worries too much. When I woke her up, she asked me if I didn't come home earlier, claiming that she heard some whisper-like scream saying, "Good morning." Again, there was no one in the house at the time, so I remembered the last time. Does anyone know anything about this? I haven't heard anything since, and I'm worried since I live alone now.
This could be explained away by a million logical scenarios, but it is a memory that never sits right with me. 9 years old, renting an old house on a street corner. Whole neighborhood is old houses built during the 1910s. Probably sounds historically charming, but it was actually just a section of town developers forgot and reserved for lower middle-class laborers, my dad. The house next to us is separated by a large side yard. It's dilapidated and hasn't been lived in for as long as we had been renting our house, playing with our dogs in the side yard. My siblings aren't home. Mum was inside and Dad had just come home from work. He waves and smiles at me and walks inside. Resume playing with dogs when I hear my mum calling me. "Anon, come over here." Mum's not calling me from inside our house. Mum's calling me from the house next to us. Think it's weird, but it was definitely Mum, so I walk on over. As I get closer, it sounds like Mum is calling me from underneath the house. The entrance to underneath the house is a wooden trapdoor that once covered the opening on hinges, but now just leans against the brick wall, partially covering the entrance. I flip it out of the way and look inside. It's pitch black. I think there's no way Mum is in there when she calls my name again from underneath this house. I remember not wanting to go in there but feeling compelled because I really thought it was Mum. Dad calls from behind me, "Anon, what are you doing? Get away from there!" I am relieved that Dad angrily tells me to get my arse over to him. Tell him Mum was calling me. Dad tells me to stop being an ass and that Mum is inside. Mum comes outside from our house to see why Dad is yelling at me. I look back over my shoulder at the entrance to underneath next door. Dad suggests that I was hearing Mum's calling echoing from underneath the house. Mum says she wasn't calling me. I know I didn't imagine this.
Well, I used to stay in the deepest, darkest room of the house, which was pretty big. It had 2 doors, one leading to the hallway with the other rooms, and another one leading to a mini hallway, with the laundry room and another bathroom attached, but no other exits or windows. Trouble is, there was little to no light in the mini hallway, and it was all unfinished concrete, with a distorted glass door. Naturally, it would get quite creepy at night, but usually I could just ignore it and fall asleep with the television on. However, every now and again I would hear strange sounds coming from the ceiling, and strange presences in the middle of the night. Eventually, I began seeing shadows moving behind the glass door. It began affecting my sleeping habits, and sometimes I would stay up whole nights. At one point, months later, my grandmother converted one of the main hallway's corners into another room, and I began staying there. I would shut the door to the freaky room at night, and the noises and shadows mostly stopped, but things were still a bit creepy. One particular day, I remember waking up one morning and finding a 3-legged stool balanced on one leg in the middle of the hall. All the doors and windows were locked, and the freaky room's door was open. So yeah, a few months later I moved out.
This happened to me while I was living in Chiclayo, around January 1995, a northern coastal city in Peru. My family and I used to live in this big fancy building that was for exclusive use by Air Force officers. My dad is a retired pilot. This building included a big-ass swimming pool, several football, soccer fields, tennis courts, a restaurant, gym, pool and table games hall, a reception, a small park with games for the kids, and even another small building for the maids and security of the compound. But the coolest thing in that building was the disco. This building was constructed during the 1940 time that Peru was holding a war against Ecuador that did not see an end until 1996. That's why they built up this site so army officers could stay in town with their families during the conflict. I'm putting some links with pics of the building you can notice is quite old. As I was saying, this building, besides being very old, once had war pilots living in there. Many of them died during combat and never returned home. When I moved out to this building, people in there would tell my parents about the ghosts and poltergeist activity at this site. At first I was kind of frightened by this, but since I didn't notice anything weird in the first few months I lived there, soon these worries vanished. One day, me and my friends decided to sneak up to the disco, which remained forbidden for kids except on Friday nights. They would do this shit called chicoteca, or translated into English, kids' disco. Other days, it would remain closed to everybody. This disco had some windows that faced the tennis court of the building. Me and my friends would jam the windows' locks and enter the disco to mess around and to drink all the sodas and snacks. One day, after lunch, around 1 or 2 p.m., we decided to go to the disco and chill a little. We jammed the window lock so all we can enter. Once there, we were all on the dance floor sitting in a circle just hanging around and having a laugh. But that day, everyone was feeling a little bit uncomfortable, like something bad was going to happen. The worst thing that could happen was being caught. But everyone, as I said, was very nervous. There was this kid named Javier, who was a sneaky little bastard always playing pranks on us. At some point during this, he just went missing. Nobody saw where he went. As time passed by, we decided to go, but at the moment we were heading towards the window, we saw a guy standing right behind us. He was wearing an old gray pilot suit, but what was strange about him was that he didn't have legs. He was half of a body floating in the air. After this, we all started screaming like a bunch of wusses. I started to cry. This pilot disappeared in a second, and we hauled ass out of there. We told our parents what happened, but they didn't believe us. A few months later, my parents and other adults would see this guy in the disco. To this day, we don't know who he was. I only know that he still wanders around the disco and is frequently seen. I remained in contact with most of the kids that saw this spirit that day, and every time we met, we discussed what happened in there. As for the kid Javier, he just went to his house because he was nervous. We thought it was him messing around with us, but this pilot disappeared right in front of us. Just to clarify.
Not paranormal, but in the car with my roommate. He's driving my car because he gets super bad car sick if he's a passenger. We're chatting when suddenly this giant brown blur smacks against the windshield. Thought someone had thrown a box. Friend is freaking out and can barely pull over. Anon, that was a fucking body? Call 911. Go back to a nearby gas station to meet the cops. Find out from stories by others at the gas station about the dead guy. Apparently, he ran into the gas station naked and started beating on and scratching up people while yelling for help. Ran out into the street. We were the third car that hit him, though the first killed him. Be cleaning off the car later so it can go to a repair shop. Find a chunk of tooth wedged in the hood. I realize now that the guy we hit, that I thought was a box, was pretty much looking straight at us when it happened, and I didn't even know it. I don't know. That tooth chunk and remembering it creeps me out more than it should.
Also, while I'm complaining, I may as well contribute. To preface this, I was a nerdy little kid in 6th to 8th grade. Being 6th grade, was not really exposed to anime, so I loved the shit out of Inuyasha when I first saw it. Yes, I acknowledge that I should have offed myself. Decide to play pretend that there's a demon world in the woods outside of our school. Yes, I acknowledge that I should have died from sheer autism. Pitch the idea as truth to my two best friends, E and JJ, was a military kind of kid and E was Mexican. E just looked at me weird when I told him about Demon World. J went with it. We play this game up until 8th grade when he moves. Very few spooky in-a-woods type occurrences, despite us being in the woods quite a bit. Creepy part comes after he moves. See, he moved away at the start of 8th grade, and when I re-established contact with him, it was near the end of the year. Get to friend's house and play fight and do kid stuff. Through play fighting and such, we bring up our old game, that we had never admitted to each other as fake. He tells me about how he goes to Demon World with some new friends he has made here. That was not nearly as long as I thought it was, anyhow. Alright, I'm game. Go meet his new friends, they're alright from what I can remember. One had a bowl haircut that made me want to punch him. He turned out to be the coolest one of the group, personality-wise. Somehow started listening to me more than Jay about rules and such in Demon World. I made the game, so I guess this makes sense in retrospect, but whatever. This dipshit gets the idea to do real demon stuff and whatever. Go home and consider it, and then next weekend I come back to Jay's house. Bowl Boy has a full-up candle pseudo-magic diagram looking shit set up in Jay's room. Well then, we commenced doing what we set out to do. Attempted to summon a shadow demon. We named all of our demons like that. Dog demon, cat demon, hair demon, etc., etc. I knew this was a game and whatever, so I wasn't overly worried about anything. Until Bowl Boy starts murmuring stuff under his breath. Both Jay and I look at each other and then to BB, who stays murmuring for another couple dozen seconds. When he's done, he finishes with a clear and loud, "Come!" and the candles go out. Door downstairs bangs open. Every picture fixture on the wall gets knocked down along the way upstairs. We all hear this and flip the fuck out. Climb out of Jay's bedroom window and down his house. I'm the last one to leave. Mind you, this all took place in the time span of like 10 seconds anyhow. Loud bang on the door that almost causes me to fall from being so startled. Could literally see the door shake with the force of it. We run away from his house and go to BB's house until Jay's parents get there. We get in so much trouble for the pictures. Don't even try to explain what happened. Hang out with Jay a few times after that, but don't really do much of the Demon World stuff. The last couple of times we played, I forced everyone in the group to acknowledge it as a game. Was understandably shaken by what had happened. Then I stopped talking to Jay for a while, until randomly, one day in 10th grade, doorbell. Jay's at my front door. "Whoa, what's up, dude?" "Not much, just thought I'd drop by." Okay. He has dark circles around his eyes but doesn't look much different from how I remember him. Clearly stronger than me now, is much more intense in character, brings up the shadow demon incident. We spend like 2 hours theorizing about how that could have been fake set up by BB, especially since he practically shouted "come." He seems really engaged in the conversation, wanting to prove it fake. I hadn't thought about it much. We agree that BB had a friend come in and ruin everything in the house and bang on our door as part of a joke. He pretty much stays at my house for 3 days. That's the last I ever saw of him. I mean, his stay wasn't really that interesting either. We just played random Xbox games and stayed in my neighborhood for most of his stay. I had become much more sedentary by then. And that's it. I pretty much believe the explanation Jay and I came up with as to how that could have occurred, but I figured I'd contribute to the thread by sharing my one instance in life where I truly wondered if, perhaps there was something supernatural in this world.
Was "come" in his voice?
I mean, it was more commanding than how he normally spoke, but that could be attributed to dramatic flair. The only thing that can't be accounted for is the candles going out. He could have made a movement that we didn't see, but they went out pretty abruptly.
Be me, 12. Using a makeshift Ouija board with my best friend because I was a pretty ghetto kid. Tried to antagonize the spirit so I would know that it was legit. Ask it what its name was. No answer. Ask it how old it was. The dial went over the 0. Ask it when it died. 1990. How did you die? The dial spelled murder. Who killed you? It slowly spelled mom. I asked if it was my mom. It replied yes, said it wanted to kill her. The dial went extremely fast in circles to where me and my friend could hardly control it. Next day, call my mom and tell her what happened. Said she had a miscarriage before I was born in 1990. Nope. Another creepy Ouija experience. Sister just moved out into her own apartment. Bought her this adorable kitten to give to her that night for a housewarming gift. Kitten slept behind the couch in my room the entire day. Another makeshift Ouija board out of a pizza box. Asked the Ouija to do something with the cat if it was really there. It literally spelled out jacket. It took me a second to realize it meant jacket as in steel. My friend and I looked behind my couch underneath, pulled out the cushions in my closet under my bed. Basically destroyed my room trying to find this fucking cat. Go out of the room to grab a drink, come back, look back, and the kitten is sound asleep in the corner behind the couch. What.jpg. A little creeped out, so after a few more questions we throw it away. Close my door to go grab a drink and reopen it to tell my friend something. An unused outlet sparks for the first and only time. Nope. Run and hide and leave friend in the room. All electronics were off and unplugged. It might not seem like much, but it was definitely a little unsettling. I used the Ouija a few times after those two experiences, and I always got this feeling like I could feel my dead brother's presence before he began to speak to us via the Ouija, and the dial would always go extremely fast to where I couldn't hold on to it. Will not use one anymore.
B12. Suddenly wake up in the middle of the night. Don't need to go to the bathroom or anything. Feel compelled to look out the window. Looking out into the almost cul-de-sac. The street ended with my house and the one across from it, but you could walk to the adjacent street. It was dark and looked kind of normal, but something felt off. After looking at it for a minute, see a large shape floating not far from the ground in the middle of the street, almost camouflaged into the night. Realize that, holy shit, am I looking at an actual UFO? It's circular but not flat, kind of stretched out vertically like the ships in cone heads. Can't say if it glimmered or not because I couldn't make out the texture. Suddenly have a horrible realization. I've been standing here for several minutes, and if I can see them, then they can see me. Can almost feel something looking at me. Run into the adjacent bathroom and lock the door. Sit there for 5 minutes or something, hoping they leave instead of doing anything else. See a bright light envelop the room for a brief second. Run back into the bedroom. A few different colored lights sweep into the room as I get in there. By the time I can look out of the window, I see a bright light going out and up, the UFO getting farther and farther away. I can't stop thinking about it. For a few years I was terrified when I saw anything flying in the sky because I feared that they realized I saw them and were looking for me. Sometimes I still think they are. The worst thing is, sometimes I wonder what they were doing here, so close to the ground. And sometimes I can't help but think how weird it was that I woke up just in time to see them leave. I even wonder why it seems like I've had problems with my memory since around the time this happened. I don't know, and it kind of scares me.
I hope that you enjoyed tonight's broadcast. If you enjoyed tonight's story, then please subscribe to the channel as more Greentext will appear daily. A new broadcast will appear when the clock strikes midnight Central Time.
Remember to check the Odyssey and Rumble pages for separate archives of previous broadcasts.